Despite my borderline social disorder and the fact that I missed a grade in elementary school due to the neighborhood I lived in and the school I attended, I managed to keep up an area of intimate relationships. I grew up in a lower middle-class area, which might or might not have been a factor, but there were many beautiful women my age. During college, I lived at home because one of the top 5 engineering universities in the world was just a 10-minute drive away. I helped active women in my area with their studies by assisting them with homework, take-home tests, and teaching them various subjects in high school and community college. In return, they offered me advice on intimate matters. This exchange brought mutual satisfaction for me and the women I mentored, who were between the ages of 18 and 21. I gained a reputation as a patient, reserved, and intelligent person, which earned me many recommendations. I could easily connect with my friends on an intellectual level, which made it easier for them to grasp the subjects I helped them with. During intimate moments, I treated them with kindness and respect, never sharing the details of our encounters with anyone. However, I suspected they might have shared these details among themselves. During this period, I had intimate relationships with 11 women, many of whom I met multiple times. While I never had romantic relationships with any of them, our dynamics were purely transactional, focusing on the exchange of knowledge and experiences. One woman, who went by the nickname Jezebel, not her real name, stood out during this time. Despite not always showing her the gentleness she deserved, it wasn't for lack of trying. Jezebel was my age, tall, strong, and had a remarkable physique, which many likened to that of a goddess. She had a seductive nature, enjoyed her intimate life, and easily attracted partners. In addition to her athletic build, Jezebel was actively involved in softball and basketball leagues. While not highly educated, she was far from unintelligent and had greater ambitions than many in our society. Her main goal was to create her own studio or adult website. I tutored her in math and business skills to help her achieve this dream. Jezebel confided in me that I was the only person she trusted to have an unprotected, intimate relationship with, as she was confident I was free of any diseases, whether real or feigned. Her reactions during our encounters seemed genuine, and she always expressed her enjoyment. Jezebel was unique among the women I knew, as she never asked for academic help in exchange for intimacy. One evening, she called unexpectedly, inviting me over. I went to her apartment without hesitation. Though I never fell in love with Jezebel, she was dear to me, and I was willing to help her without expecting anything in return. I appreciated Allison for her positive qualities and for being the only woman I had ever truly loved. Most importantly, she gave me 3 wonderful children. One of them, Amber, is at the heart of this part of my story. Amber was a remarkable 12-year-old girl who inherited her mother's beauty and the best qualities from both of us. She had a sharp intelligence that matched mine, achieving the same level of genius on tests, but she also surpassed me in social skills by the age of 10. Amber was kind, compassionate, and empathetic, qualities that made her the most caring person I had ever known. She had a radiant presence that could light up any room. Jerry, on the other hand, was a cheerful and energetic boy who had clearly inherited his athleticism from Allison. I made an effort to learn about baseball and basketball to connect with him and his love for sports. Despite his energy, Jerry was kind-hearted, never spoke ill of anyone, and always had a smile on his face. He had a close relationship with both of his sisters, and they all got along wonderfully. Despite having these amazing children, Allison and I often clashed over our parenting styles. The tension was most noticeable in her relationship with Amber, which was strained. Allison was overly strict and sometimes made harsh remarks toward Amber. By the time Amber turned 12, she would only agree to go anywhere with Allison if I was present. This became a serious issue when Allison wanted to take the children to the lake house for a week during the summer, and I had to work. It took all my persuasion to convince Amber to go, along with a serious conversation with Allison to ensure she would treat Amber kindly during the trip. Although Allison had better relationships with Whitney and Jerry, there were moments of friction with them as well. Even as a stay-at-home mom, She often attended various classes, which meant that the time I spent with the children was usually more meaningful. After about 15 years of marriage, with 3 wonderful children and a wife I deeply cared for, I returned home from a one-night business trip. It was early in the afternoon, and I had informed Allison of my schedule in advance. I had hoped to have some private time with her before the children returned from school at 3:30 p.m. As I approached our street, I noticed a familiar red Corvette passing by. It belonged to Roger Mayberry, one of the top salespeople in my company. He specialized in selling military products and had a natural charm that made him excel at his job. I found it odd to see him in my neighborhood at that hour, but dismissed it, assuming he had a legitimate reason to be nearby. A few minutes later, I arrived home. The next thing I remember was waking up in a hospital bed. As I opened my eyes, a nurse hurried in, followed by a doctor. "How are you feeling, Mr. Banks?" asked the nurse kindly. "It feels like my head is being squeezed," I replied weakly. "We're very glad you woke up so quickly," she said, checking the monitor beside me. "Why am I in the hospital, and how did I get here?" I asked, confused. Dr. Petra, a warm and professional doctor, explained, "Your wife informed us that you tripped in the bedroom, fell backward onto the marble floor, and hit your head. You suffered a concussion." As the memory of what led to my fall flooded back, a wave of sadness swept over me. My eyes widened, and I let out a groan. The realization hit me. I had discovered that my wife had been unfaithful. This emotional shock overwhelmed me, and I vomited into a container the nurse had quickly provided. Dr. Petra noted that my reaction might indicate a more serious concussion, but also acknowledged the role of emotional distress in my symptoms. After calming down, I asked about Allison. Nurse Nancy informed me that she had gone to pick up the children from school. Glancing at my watch, I realized it was 3:28 p.m. Dr. Petra recommended I eat something to regain my strength, and soon a bowl of oatmeal was brought to me. I felt slightly better after eating, and then Nancy returned to announce that I had visitors. My 3 beloved children rushed into the room, all trying to reach me first. Their presence brought comfort and reminded me of the bright moments in my life, despite the turmoil I was experiencing. As I embraced my children in the hospital room, their presence brought an immense sense of comfort amidst the chaos of my emotions. Their laughter and chatter filled the space with light, momentarily overshadowing the pain that lingered both physically and emotionally. I couldn't help but smile, albeit cautiously, as I warned them not to touch my head or neck. Their joy was contagious, lifting my spirits despite the turmoil in my heart. Amber's tear-streaked face gradually lit up, her relief evident, while Jerry and Whitney competed for my attention. Watching them, I felt a glimmer of solace, even as I remained acutely aware of Allison standing nearby, her expression a peculiar mix of amusement and confusion. Her attempts to join the conversation were met with polite deflection. I avoided direct eye contact, unwilling to let her presence ruin the rare moment of happiness. After about 15 minutes, Nurse Nancy entered the room, subtly signaling to Allison that it was time for the children to leave. Despite their reluctance, Allison ushered them toward the door, pausing briefly to speak with me. I closed my eyes, bracing for whatever apology or excuse she might offer. "Brian, I'm sorry you had to see me like this," she began, her voice trembling with what I presumed was feigned remorse. "I never wanted you to know. I'm not the wife you deserve. I hope we can talk about this when you feel better." Her words barely registered. The hollow sincerity was palpable, and her actions spoke louder than her apologies. She left, promising to visit, though I doubted her sincerity. Later, as I spoke with Dr. Petra about my recovery, I realized I needed to channel my emotions into a plan, a strategy to secure the future of my children and myself. The betrayal had cut deeply, but it also awakened a determination in me to reclaim control over my life. The next day, Allison returned with the children, though her absence the day before confirmed what I already knew. I no longer held a meaningful place in her priorities. She made a feeble attempt to engage me in conversation, her tone soft and contrite, but her words rang hollow. "Brian, I'm so sorry," she murmured. "I really hope we can move on after this." I responded with muted sarcasm, masking my hurt with a cold detachment. Her apologies lacked any acknowledgement of her affair or a genuine desire to repair the damage she'd caused. The charade was clear. She regretted being caught, not her actions. My resolve solidified when Allison's parents visited me later that evening. Their veiled threats about custody of the children only strengthened my determination. They pleaded for forgiveness on Allison's behalf, but their words carried an undercurrent of manipulation. It was evident that Allison hoped to use our children as leverage in the event of a divorce. I listened patiently, masking my anger, but inside, I was already crafting a plan to ensure my children's well-being. On Friday morning, after receiving clearance from Dr. Petra, I left the hospital with a renewed sense of purpose. My assistant, Jack, drove me home, but first, we made a stop at Jezebel's office. Jezebel had always been a trusted confidant, and I knew her insight would be invaluable as I navigated the path ahead. She greeted me warmly, her vibrant energy and confidence as striking as ever. "Brian, what brings you here?" she asked with a playful smile, noticing my bandaged head. "I need your help," I replied, my voice tinged with both determination and vulnerability. I recounted the events that had led me to her office, laying bare my emotions and my plans. Jezebel listened intently, her support unwavering. "Anything, Brian," she assured me, her words a balm to my wounded spirit. "I'll help in any way I can, as long as it doesn't bring harm." Her commitment to my cause reignited a sense of hope. Together, we began to outline the steps needed to secure a future where my children and I could thrive, free from the shadows of betrayal and doubt. This was just the beginning of reclaiming my life. I laughed softly, warning the kids not to touch my head or neck as they clamored around me. With some effort, I hugged all three, listening as they all talked at once. Despite my pain and disorientation, I couldn't help but giggle. Laughing outright would have been too painful, but their presence lifted my spirits. I was so engrossed in their chatter that I almost missed Allison standing nearby. Amber's tear-streaked face brightened, and the other two kids beamed with joy. Allison, meanwhile, wore a complicated expression, a mix of amusement and confusion, as she observed our interaction. I avoided discussing my injuries, and instead steered the conversation toward their recent classes. Allison occasionally interrupted with questions or comments, but I deliberately avoided eye contact, focusing on the children. About 15 minutes later, Nancy whispered something to Allison, who then announced it was time for the kids to leave, citing my need for rest. She promised the children they could visit me the next day. Saying goodbye, the kids showered my hands with kisses. Amber seemed in better spirits. Jerry looked fine, but Whitney lingered. She stood at a distance, her eyes glistening with tears before she quickly turned away, trying to hide her emotions. As they left, Allison stayed behind, instructing the kids to wait by the elevator. She approached me, and I closed my eyes, bracing myself for whatever she was about to say. "Brian, I'm sorry you had to see me like this," she began, her voice heavy with remorse. "I never wanted you to know. I'm not the wife you deserve." Her words stung, but I remained silent. "Maybe tomorrow you'll feel like talking," she added softly. "If you do, just call me." Her tone hinted at her reluctance to visit me again unless I initiated contact. Once she left, Dr. Petra returned to check on me. "You don't seem too upset after talking to your wife," she commented. "I didn't talk to my wife," I replied flatly. Though my heart ached, I resolved to channel my emotions into productive work. Nancy smiled when I assured her I wouldn't let my health deteriorate again. The doctor recommended another night in the hospital, with a possible discharge the next day. She firmly instructed me to take it easy for at least a week and refrain from working immediately. Grinning, I promised to follow her advice, but only if she wouldn't mention my recovery timeline to Allison. Dr. Petra laughed. agreeing to play along as long as she didn't have to outright lie. That evening, I contacted my parents, who hadn't spoken to Allison in years, and then called my assistant to bring a notebook and pen. I wasn't ready to tackle tasks just yet, but wanted to be prepared for the morning. I handed Allison 2 Tylenol tablets, pretending they were prescribed painkillers, and closed the guest room door, feigning exhaustion. Over the weekend, I avoided meaningful conversations and intimacy with her. Surprisingly, it was easier than I had anticipated. My plan was unfolding seamlessly. Using Allison's credit card, I ordered 2 small, high-tech video cameras and motion detectors, set for delivery on Monday. Jezebel had sent me a contract, which I printed and promptly deleted. I stacked it among updated benefit and insurance forms from my company database, marking where Allison needed to sign. On Sunday, I handed Allison the stack of documents, claiming they were necessary for health insurance and other formalities. Seeing her name listed as a co-beneficiary on my life insurance, she smiled, reassured that I wasn't planning to leave her. She signed the documents without question and handed them to me as I played cards with Whitney and Jerry. By Monday morning, the cameras had arrived. Jack, my loyal assistant, helped install them and set up motion sensors in the master bedroom. To ensure no evidence was left behind, we worked with latex gloves. With Jack's expertise in technology, it took only minutes to connect the cameras to Allison's computer remotely. Using a password-cracking program, we discovered her password, Princess, one of the most predictable and common passwords imaginable. Jack couldn't contain his laughter as he set up remote access to the recordings. On Tuesday, I went to work feeling composed, leaving the house secured with activated cameras. I arranged for $10,000 to be transferred from a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands to Roger Mayberry's bank account, fueling the setup for his downfall. By Friday, I had uploaded the first incriminating video of Allison and Mayberry to a paid site, transferring $5,000 to Allison's account through Jezebel's help. Mayberry's face was pixelated, but the video was placed in a category aptly named, Wives Cheat on Their Husbands in the Marital Bed. Over the following 2 weeks, I uploaded more videos and transferred an additional $20,000 to Allison and Mayberry's accounts. The evidence was mounting, and I knew the clock was ticking before they noticed the transactions. On Monday, Mayberry faced a security check initiated by his employer. During the lie detector test, he was confronted with unedited footage and bank statements tied to the Cayman Islands transfers. Cornered, he confessed to his affair with Allison and acknowledged the deposits, but feebly claimed ignorance about their source. By Friday morning, divorce papers were ready, accompanied by printed screenshots of Allison's videos and the site's access password. I planned a dramatic reveal. Allison, I said with deliberate coldness, you might want to see what your life has become. I slid the papers and the printed images across the table. Her face turned pale as she flipped through the evidence. Tears welled in her eyes. I don't understand, she whispered. Oh, you will, I retorted sharply. I'm taking the kids for the weekend. Hire the best lawyer you can find. You'll need it. As I grabbed my coat, a courier arrived to serve Allison with the subpoena. The look of shock on her face was priceless. Later that day, Mayberry was fired, escorted out of his building, and stripped of his security clearance. My assistant informed me that he'd tried to contact Allison, but was intercepted by company security, who reminded him of the legal consequences of his actions. The pieces of my plan had fallen into place. Allison's betrayal was public knowledge, and Mayberry's professional life was in ruins. Though I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, I felt a measure of justice had been served. It was late, and I heard shouting in the parking lot. Someone was yelling my name. I glanced outside and saw Mayberry, clearly drunk and causing a scene. Sherry, who lived nearby, asked, "Should I call the police?" I couldn't help but laugh. No, Sherry. Call Jack and have him come here immediately. The situation felt almost surreal. When Jack arrived, we positioned ourselves at the window of our building, where we had a clear view of Mayberry's antics. Conveniently, this spot was also covered by some of the best surveillance cameras in the area. Mayberry staggered back and forth, slurring and shouting. Without wasting any time, Jack slipped out the side door, hiding next to the building where he was out of sight. I confidently stepped out the front door, drawing Mayberry's attention. As soon as he saw me, he began hurling insults, accusing me of firing him and ruining his security clearance. His words quickly escalated into actions as he lunged at me. I strategically moved towards Jack's hiding spot, allowing Mayberry to get close enough to take a swing. Although his blow only lightly grazed my shoulder, I dramatically collapsed as if struck by a heavy punch. Mayberry stood over me, poised to strike again, when Jack suddenly appeared in front of the cameras. With a swift move, Jack grabbed Mayberry and delivered a powerful blow to his jaw, sending him sprawling backward and unconscious. Jack helped me to my feet as I leaned against a nearby car, feigning dizziness. Without hesitation, Jack called emergency services. The entire scene played out under the watchful eye of the surveillance cameras. Within minutes, the police arrived, handcuffed Mayberry to a stretcher, and sent him to the hospital. I filed assault charges the next day. Afterward, I decided to take the kids on a weekend getaway to a picturesque mountain resort. It was the perfect escape to regroup and plan the next steps. At the end of the trip, I broke the news to the children about the impending divorce. Amber seemed relieved, while the other two children remained surprisingly calm. My promise to love and support them reassured them. Upon our return Sunday evening, I braced for Allison's reaction, expecting an outburst. To my surprise, she was calmer than I anticipated. Having anticipated possible drama, I had already moved valuables and most of my belongings to a secure, climate-controlled storage facility. The kids enthusiastically recounted our pleasant weekend to Allison. Her first words to me were unexpectedly conciliatory. "I don't understand how you managed to orchestrate that video," she admitted. Despite her tone, I neither apologized nor admitted to anything. Instead, I calmly asked her to stop accusing me of actions I didn't commit. With a touch of defiance, I replied, "I've been busy this weekend, Allison." She sighed. "I hired a lawyer and a computer expert. I still can't figure out how you covered your tracks so well. This won't be easy for me." "I understand your concerns," I said. "Let's focus on negotiating custody. For the sake of the children, I suggest sole custody for me, ensuring stability. You'd have extensive visitation rights, and I'd even buy you a new house." Allison's expression hardened. "I'm not living with Roger," she snapped. I raised a hand to stop her. "I don't want to hear it, Allison. You're free to be with whoever you want. I'm offering a solution, not an argument." After a tense silence, she softened. "I'm not a bad mother. I love our children and can't bear the thought of being separated from them. We need to avoid court battles for their sake. What do you propose?" I asked. "Let's use a mediator, a former family court judge. We'll follow their recommendations for custody and keep this private." I was pleasantly surprised by her suggestion. Agreed. "Let's meet with our lawyers next week to finalize details." During the meeting, we agreed on a mediator and outlined terms. Property division per our prenuptial agreement, alimony arrangements, and conditions regarding the children. Allison reluctantly accepted restrictions on contact with Mayberry and agreed not to influence the children's testimony. In return, I ensured the removal of her compromising video from a paid website. The mediator conducted private interviews with each child, which left me anxious but hopeful. Amber's apparent hostility toward Allison worked in my favor, and I trusted the mediator to weigh the children's preferences. After meeting with the children, the mediator surprised us by offering a decision earlier than expected. At the hearing, I could sense the mediator leaning toward joint custody, which filled me with dread. But when the decision finally came, I felt a mixture of relief and satisfaction. The agreement was fair, and while it didn't grant me everything I wanted, it prioritized the children's well-being. As we moved forward, Allison and I maintained a fragile peace. We avoided hostility and refrained from involving the children in our disputes. In the end, the arrangement allowed us to part ways amicably while safeguarding what mattered most: our children's happiness and stability. The mediator didn't even want to hear the half-hour closing arguments prepared by the lawyers. After carefully reviewing all the evidence and prioritizing the children's welfare, he announced his decision. I have decided to grant sole custody of all 3 children to their father, Brian Banks. Additionally, I find the existing agreement, which both parties have endorsed, to be fair and in the best interest of the children. The case will therefore be resolved based on the terms outlined in the contract. On Monday, you will receive a certified copy of this decision to submit to family court, along with the settlement agreement. Thank you for entrusting this case to me, and I wish you all the best in the future. Tears flowed for different reasons on the ride home. The atmosphere was heavy, tinged with a deep sadness. While I wasn't angry, Allison appeared utterly defeated. For me, the familiar pang of sorrow returned as our family breakup became final, even though it was necessary and had ended peacefully. That evening, we shared the news with the children. Allison remained distant, so I took the lead in the conversation. I hugged Allison warmly, and Amber embraced her as well. I spoke positively about Allison, emphasizing that we both loved them and explaining the visitation arrangements. A week later, I bought a new house for Allison as agreed, and she moved out within the 2-week time frame. With help from our children, her parents, and her brother, we packed her belongings. A moving company handled the heavier items, including the master bedroom furniture. Months later, after the divorce was finalized, I hosted a party to thank those who had supported me. The celebration's purpose was kept vague for the children, but Amber, my perceptive 13-year-old, figured it out. Before the guests arrived, Amber came into the room, closed the door, and made me sit down. Sitting on my lap, she asked a difficult question. When I inquired why she was doing this, she smiled mischievously and revealed that she had spoken candidly to the mediator. I told him what I saw Mom and that man being overly affectionate in our house. It bothered me. Even if I hadn't seen it, her behavior was unfaithful. I didn't want to live with her, and I knew Jerry and Whitney needed to stay here too. I made sure he knew that, she said with a broad smile, kissing me on the cheek before leaving. I decided not to dwell on her revelation, focusing instead on celebrating with friends and family. At the party, Jezebel dazzled everyone, quickly bonding with Jerry and Whitney by playing baseball and chatting effortlessly. She even managed to connect with Amber, who initially seemed a bit shy, but later engaged in lively conversations about fashion. Jezebel's charm and warmth made a lasting impression on all of us. Midway through the evening, she pulled me aside, embraced me, and whispered, "Let your parents watch the kids tonight. Come home with me. I'll bring you back tomorrow at 10, but I can't promise you'll be fully conscious." She kissed me passionately and disappeared into the crowd. Later that night, Jezebel nearly drove me mad with desire. Before I left, I confessed, "I don't know what you see in me, but I love being with you. Do you think there's something real between us?" She smiled warmly and said, "I see a kind, generous, intelligent man. Take me to the resort with you for 3 days, starting on the 14th. Let's see if we want something serious. I'm tired of casual relationships. I need a man who belongs only to me." 2 years after that life-changing moment, my life has transformed in remarkable ways. The children are thriving, excelling academically, socially, and athletically. Allison adheres to her visitation schedule, and her relationship with the children has improved. Last summer, she even hosted them at her parents' lake house without any issues. My business has flourished, bringing financial success beyond what I imagined. A minor administrative mishap exposed sensitive details about my government dealings, but it didn't harm my reputation. Roger Mayberry moved to the West Coast shortly after the custody decision, taking a job as a salesman for a small electronics company far removed from secret technologies. The children fully accept Jezebel as a friend, not a mother, and genuinely enjoy her company. 2 years later, she decided we should be exclusive. She sold her adult website and moved in with us, taking on maternal responsibilities while running a small online clothing business. Though marriage remains off the table, she devotes herself to me and our family, bringing love and stability to our lives.